This talk is supported by Small PDF, the successful Swiss scale-up making PDF easy for over 1 billion people around the world since 2013. You may remember them from a previous podcast we hosted with their CEO, Dennis Just. Their mission is to make PDFs and life easy for people across the world, a mission made possible with their 90-plus amazing employees across Zurich, Belgrade and Barcelona. If you want to join this fast-growing Swiss scale-up, visit smallpdf.com/Swisspreneur and apply. He said, look, we do a test episode. You interview me, sort of as a handover, exactly what we're doing now to a certain degree. And then we show it to Alain. And if he likes it, then you can continue. Of course, also if you like it. And if not, it was just 1 hour of our time. That's it. I said, sure, let's do it. I mean, there's nothing to lose, right? Let's jump.
Welcome to the Swisspreneur Show, a podcast about startup stories and learnings from experienced entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Silvan.
Hi, Silvan. Welcome to your show.
To my own show. Yeah,
Yes.
It's a bit weird to be on the other side, but I'm really glad that you're here today. And
Thank you.
I quickly want to introduce you. You basically have Indian roots. You grew up in the United States and you're living in Switzerland for 3 years. And of course, your name is Ansuya. So I'm really glad that you're here today and that you do the interview with me, because you might do a few more episodes for the Swisspreneur Show in the future. We're really excited about that.
Yes, let's see how this one goes. But thanks, Silvan, for this opportunity. Just to quickly introduce myself, as Silvan said, I've lived in multiple cities across 3 continents and 3 countries. I come with a computer science background. Previously, I was working in Silicon Valley, and then circumstances brought me here to Zurich. And also, we share a mutual love for entrepreneurship, which led me to start my company 2 years ago. And as circumstances also brought us to meet each other. And I'm really glad to be here today to try this out for the first time.
I think that's the perfect background that we could have asked for any potential Swisspreneur podcast host.
Well, thank you. Let's see if I can do as good of a job.
Absolutely.
So today we have Silvan, which is interesting because he's been doing over 200 interviews so far for Swisspreneur, and he's the host and managing director here. He's also the enterprise account director at Rentouch and co-founder and former CEO of Gymhopper. So how does it feel to be sitting on the other side of the table today?
To be honest, it's much brighter than I expected. So all the lights here, and it's a bit weird because I usually enjoy asking the questions and not being in the spotlight myself. So I'm probably more nervous than interviewing, our top well-known famous guest, but also a bit excited. So I'm curious to see what turns out with this episode.
Well, I mean, since you've, had so much experience doing this with so many people, I think the best question to start with is, what was the most inspiring interview you've done so far?
Well, there's not one interview, obviously.
Yeah.
It's really difficult to pick one. But I think there were 2 key lessons that have been shared over and over again. The first one was really people often started solving their own problems and then built a company around that. Mm-hmm. I think that's very powerful because we often hear there are always challenges when it comes to entrepreneurship. But if you have your own intrinsic motivation, you solve a problem for yourself, that's the stuff that keeps you going in tough times. Mm-hmm. So that's number one. And number 2 is basically the timing. So very often we think, there's an overnight success, etc. And the timing is basically something that you cannot influence as an entrepreneur, but you can try to understand how are the markets shifting, how is the world changing, and where do you stand in that regard. I think it was in the very first episode with Alain, the founder of Swisspreneur, where he talked about the analogy of surfing a wave and basically thinking about that when it comes to timing for your startup. And I think that's crucial and often overlooked.
Okay. Well, we're going to dive into your story to see, how you navigated all these uncertain times and all the things that you've done over the years. And I'm sure listeners will be happy to learn from your story today. So let's get started.
Let's find out, yeah.
Yes. So you grew up in the Emmental Valley in Switzerland, and your parents were vets. So it must be, unlikely for them that you went on to study business administration. So what influenced this choice?
Well, there's quite some stuff behind it. If you ask my parents, back in the days when they were sort of also babysitting us, we very often were actually going with them to work. So I then spent a lot of time with my dad in his car. He basically drove from farm to farm, took care of the cows there. And for me, it was very clear early on, I always preferred to play with the radio or with the technical stuff in his car than going out and spending time with the animals. It just has always been that way. So for me, it was very natural. Well, I'm probably not going to become a vet myself. My sister was the complete opposite. For her, she couldn't get enough. So whenever there was a phone call late at night, she ran to my parents' bedroom and asked, "You have an emergency? Can I come with you?" And I was like, "Just let me sleep. I want to do my technical stuff." So it was very clear, veterinary practice, that's probably not going to be my path. And then I always loved doing stuff or organizing stuff already very early on with like our neighbor kids where I grew up in the Emmental Valley. But then the first really big point of touch with entrepreneurship was basically during high school. So there we were participating in the Young Enterprise Switzerland project, and basically founded a company, not legally, but just as that project. For 1 year, we imported a cell phone holder from China, sold that in Switzerland. We did write a business plan and all of that stuff. We also had, of course, a lot of internal discussions and marketing activities to take care of, etc. And that was really the first time when I realized, well, this is actually a lot of fun. I really enjoy doing that. And that's also then one of the reasons that led me to go to business school afterwards.
Okay, so that you would say like kickstart your sort of quest for entrepreneurship.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because I was going to ask, like, since you mentioned you were really interested in the technicality of things, why not go in a computer science field? But I guess,
It's a good question. I always loved computers and playing around with computers. So I even did like a lot of hardware stuff. So I always received the old computers from the business of my parents and basically built something new out of them.
Yeah.
So I was really fascinated in that computer stuff, but I never learned to code.
Okay.
Maybe something went wrong there, I don't know. But for me, it was always more about then doing projects, working with great people, getting stuff out there and really moving the needle forward. That was like my core motivation. And therefore, business seemed to be a better fit for me, mainly because I couldn't program, but also because that was more like, it felt like a better fit for me.
Okay. Well, you said that you started, your journey already in high school, right? And that's like founding, your business also. I know with Gymhopper at such a young age is very rare. So I want to know more, like, what was your parents' reaction to these daring life choices, you were making? Because they're like working on the farm, they're working with animals, and then they see this guy going out there forming a business, in high school already.
So already like going to business school, because I didn't go to business school to nearby where I lived, but actually in the eastern part to St Gallen. So I also lived there during the week. So that was already the first step, basically, where my dad called my aunt, whose daughter actually already went there before. Yeah. And then they're like, "Is this a good path? Would you recommend that?" So he did his due diligence, right?
Okay.
But then my parents, when it was about the time of Gymhopper, of course, they were sort of like, "You just finished your bachelor's degree. Now it's okay, but you have to do your master's degree one day." So we had these endless discussions, right? For them, my studies were not done before I actually finished my master's degree, which I eventually never did afterwards. But that was always their take, like, it's okay, you can work on your startup. It's maybe not ideal. You should do something real, like get a proper job. You should also finish your studies and do your master's. But it was okay that I did that. And then I think my tactic was always like, yeah, maybe I will do it later, maybe next year, to always hold them on like a bit longer. And then at one point I told them, that's it, I'm not going to do it anymore.
And they were like, yeah, I mean, anyway, you figured, it seems like you're figuring things out. So they were more easy about it.
Sort of. I think it took him quite some time to get used to that. And they also felt like, well, what if he's like not finding his way? What if he gets lost along the way? But for them, it was always important that I was able to finance my life on my own, that I can stand on my own feet, as we would say in German. And basically, that was always their top priority. And although I pay myself a very low salary for the early Gymhopper days, somehow it worked out. And I think that then also gave them the confidence to say, well, if he wants to do that, it's working within what we had envisioned for him, that's going to be fine.
Well, excellent. I mean, it all seemed to have worked out, so I'm sure they're proud.
I'm actually very lucky that they never put any pressure on me or my sister to take over their business, because that would like be a logical next step. They never did that.
That's good.
And I think that would have been a huge
Yeah.
ingredient for unhappiness. So I'm very thankful for that.
Okay. Well, I mean, you started already, right, in 2015 with Gymhopper. So how did that idea come about?
So it's basically my own problem. Fun fact.
Well, that's like the best kind of business.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So for me, I studied in St Gallen, the eastern part, traveled there once a week, and then on the weekends I always went back to my parents' place. And I had my gym membership, and I loved hitting the gym. I loved working out. And with that membership, I was not able to train anywhere else except in my small hometown, right? But I was visiting people and friends in Bern, in Zurich, and of course also in St Gallen where I studied. So I wished that there was an easy option to actually be able to train in all these locations without having to purchase a second or even a third gym membership. So then I thought like, okay, there are the gym chains, but very often they don't like to have a lot of free weights or people training the way that I wanted to train. So then basically the idea came up like, why not connecting the independent gyms and basically creating an offering exactly for the need that I had myself to then make that possible.
Okay. And then what was like the first pivotal thing that got this idea off the ground? Like what did you have to do? Like the first major...
Right.
Yeah.
So the first thing was actually we then came into a course in university where we said it was actually an entrepreneurship course. So then we said, we want to work on this idea, and then you then had to write a business plan, do your own market research, and then also do a final presentation. So that's basically how we then started and how we also were actually able to invest time into that business idea besides our studies. And the first idea was, of course, completely different to what it then looked like later down the road.
Yeah.
We actually wanted to build a platform where you could buy single entry tickets like day passes for gyms because we saw a similar concept in the US and we thought, oh, this would actually be a good solution to the problem that I'm facing.
And when you say we, so like who was on the team? How did you meet Louis, who was your co-founder?
Exactly,
correct?
yeah. Louis was my co-founder.
Okay,
we actually met in the Young Entrepreneurs Club. So that was a club where I was the president of to push entrepreneurship forward at the university. Because, HSG, the university, was still very much about banking and consulting, all the traditional stuff. I also almost, felt like, okay, that's probably going to be the path that I'm taking. But then I saw this Young Entrepreneurs Club and was then able to lead that initiative. And that's where we basically first met. And then also sort of had this idea, like we both wanted to do a startup company, then also pretty much rushed into things. At the beginning, there was also a third co-founder, Tamara, for this B2C approach. But then later down the road, when we pivoted to a more B2B focus, she then dropped out because she really was focused on the B2C marketing part.
Okay. I mean, also having faced this myself, like finding the right co-founder is like one of the toughest things to do.
Yeah.
It's like, finding a life partner, like in a marriage. So what advice would you, give to our listeners to how to go about this?
It's tough because it also, we will probably talk about that later down the road. I did not make the best decisions there.
Okay.
So Louis and I, we didn't really know each other for that long. So we didn't really have a past. We were not really friends before. We worked together in the Young Entrepreneurs Club, but that was basically it. We never went out for drinks or did a lot of sports or anything like that together. So I think if you share a common history, you know each other for years and you know how the other person ticks, I think that's a perfect starting point. And therefore, university is actually great because if you have your people that you know from university, you've worked with them on different projects, they became good friends, you also know each other socially, so you know more about the person than just the business stuff. I think that's a way better starting point. And then there are just two things, I guess. It's first about shared values. So you need to be very specific and clear about what is important to you, that you can also define those values and write them down and make sure that you're actually aligned. But then also having complementary skill sets, that you both have different areas that you can excel in to then actually make the startup happen. So you need someone who can actually build the product. That was certainly not me because there's no coding experience.
Right.
And you need to have someone who can actually sell it to then acquire customers.
Okay. So then was it Louis or who was it, like your CTO? You went on to look for one. You even went on to Lisbon to get your development team going. So how was that process like?
So yeah, basically Louis and I, we started then together, right?
Yeah.
He could code a bit. It's hard for me to judge how good or how bad, but he was also in business school basically. So we had more of an overlap when it came to the skill set. But then we basically said, okay, we do need a technical person to actually build the app. At first, we then worked with an agency in Pakistan, basically, because there was a former co-student that was running that agency. It was okay for a prototype, but not for a real business product to use afterwards. So that's why we then decided, through a contact of Louis, a Portuguese guy who lived in Switzerland, recommended us to a friend of his in Lisbon. And we then hired him as a CTO after we closed our initial seed funding round to then really build the product and say, now we want to do that the right way. We want to build it from scratch, and we want to build it in-house because we need that technical capability. And I think that was an excellent call.
Okay. So far in this journey, like, was there any point where you were like, oh shit, I should have done this differently, or you regretted what was going on, or everything was moving smoothly?
Not smoothly. I mean, there were many obstacles along the way. The first one was really when we then tried to onboard the gyms for the first model, with the day passes. I called them. I never did cold calling before, right? So I had no experience. And then basically I called those gyms, and most of them said, like, stop calling me, don't waste my time, I don't understand what you want from me. So it was really difficult, even though it was completely free of charge for the gyms to join, to get just one gym on board. I think I called like 50 gyms, and only one said, after a lot of talk and negotiations, yeah, we're going to participate in that. And that's when I realized this model is not going to work.
Okay.
So what we did then is we said, okay, this is not working. And then you can either say, okay, we tried, we're going to stop. Let's go back to the university and study on your master's degree.
Yeah.
But then we picked the car of my parents and said, Louis and I, over the summer break, instead of going for a summer job, we want to drive from gym to gym and ask them for feedback. And there, of course, the student role helped a lot. We said, we're students, we have an idea, we want to pick your brain as the expert to the gym owners. And they, of course, will meet with us for a coffee or for a drink to then just talk about that. And then we learned that day passes are such a small thing when it comes to the overall revenue percentage, basically completely irrelevant to the Swiss gyms, that they just don't care about that. So we learned day passes, never going to work. If we want to make this work, we have to tie it to the annual membership, because that's the core business of every Swiss gym. They want to sell their annual gym memberships, right?
Right.
So then we learned, well, we could actually ask for money from the gyms and offer the network the exchange free of charge on top of their existing membership, because then we could help them to sell more memberships and also keep their existing members for longer at their own gym so that they don't churn. Then we sort of pivoted, and we always pitched a slightly different idea for every meeting that we did because of the stuff that we learned along the way. And then at a certain point in time, it was at the gym here nearby in Zurich, the guy then said, like, guys, I really love the idea. Where can I sign up?
Okay.
How much does it cost? And then we were like, well, we are just, gathering feedback. We have no contracts or anything. But then we knew this might actually work. And then we, started to create contracts, like pre-contracts, basically no risk if we never start. But if we start, you have to pay.
Right.
And then we sort of had these learnings. We had a model that seemed to be working, and we had the first contracts. And then with that stuff in our backpacks, we basically went to business angels to get some money to actually finance and build the whole thing.
So that was like hitting the nail on the head, getting the ball rolling. So understanding both sides of the marketplace, right? Also what is important for the gyms, but as well for the customers.
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. So, I mean, at this point, like, your company was growing and your business was making profits as well, right? In Switzerland, more or less?
Well, later down the road, yes,
Okay,
we were profitable, but
on.
at the beginning, of course not.
Okay, of course not. But then when you later down the road started making profits, what made you decide to sell?
Well, that's a big story. So we had a very fast track to success in Switzerland. So after 6 months, we basically were the biggest network here, bigger than any chain. And our investors, the business angels, they were super happy. They said, wow, this thing is like a rocket ship. It's working. Let's go international. Let's make it really big and build the biggest network in Europe. We were very enthusiastic about that, because then they said, here, let's do another fundraising round. Now we go international. We did that, and then we had to learn the hard way that the model that we were building up here in Switzerland was actually a Swiss-specific model and did not work the same abroad. Why? Because here, as I mentioned, we have the annual memberships. However, abroad, due to other laws, usually you have a monthly membership that you can also cancel on a monthly basis. So if a gym goer needs more flexibility, they're just going to switch to a chain and cancel their membership, right? So there was a much lower demand for what we had to offer of Gymhopper, and therefore it was not only more costly, but also way harder to actually acquire gyms. We then did build parts of Denmark and Austria as a next network, but it never really started to fly there. Okay. So then we had to think, okay, what are we going to do? Because we had the biggest Swiss network, but the international expansion is not working. So that was basically the whole part of our story, when then eventually a US competitor or someone would actually buy us due to the network that we built, but Switzerland alone would be way too small. So then we said, we do want to focus on the Swiss market and actually switch and also add an additional income stream, basically corporate fitness, so that companies could purchase a membership for their employees to then let them train at all of our network partners. And that's eventually what we did. And then this attracted MyClubs, the Austrian company, because they also wanted to expand their corporate fitness offering in Switzerland, but they were only focusing on the big cities and not the overall country as we did. And therefore they needed a network and also someone who knew the local market, who already did that to a certain degree. And then we were in talks, and then that was like the logical next step. Us not having the perspective of building an international business, them needing a strong network and partner to actually execute that. And then it was just sort of a natural thing. I think we were very lucky there because it's also like the future outlook was not that good, right? Like that's not a case that you want to invest the next 10 years of your life into, right?
So then how did you go on negotiating with them?
So there, luckily, we had one of our investors. He's an M&A advisor. Okay. So he has a lot of experience. He sold companies like Students.ch or also Qumram. Okay. So he has a lot of experience in that regard and supported us along the journey. That was really, really interesting to sort of look over his shoulders and just, learn how that stuff works.
Okay. And so once Gymhopper got acquired by MyClubs, you still worked there as head of business development for 3 years, right, till 2021. So how was it like for you then to no longer be the CEO and, working in the umbrella of this company?
I think it was difficult, probably more difficult than I would have admitted myself. In that moment, it was totally fine. It was also exciting at first and also great for me to just, after 3 years, it felt like sprinting like every day for 3 years straight. It was also good to sort of have a break and have less pressure because I didn't have to satisfy the investors and stuff. But at the same time, it was also difficult because, of course, now you have other people who can also make decisions and you might not always agree or you see things differently. And then after 2 years, that was also then the first point when I decided to reduce my workload at MyClubs to then pursue, again, other options because I just wanted to have, again, a more entrepreneurial spirit. For me, it was always clear, it's great for now. It's also part of the deal. And I was totally fine. But it was also clear that this will not be forever. And we always knew and openly communicated that.
Okay.
This episode is sponsored by Startup Nights 2022. On November 3rd and 4th, you'll have the chance to showcase your startup, get inspired, meet investors, and network with like-minded peers at the 6th annual edition of Startup Nights in Winterthur. Check out startup-nights.ch to learn more and register for the event.
That point where, you sold Gymhopper to MyClubs, this was in 2018. You also worked as the innovation manager in SVB. You joined the YTI LI program, and then you joined Swisspreneur, right? So what was going on that year? Like, why did you try so many things? What were you looking for, that pivotal year?
Yeah. So for me, I never worked in a corporate, and I just had this fear of, I like doing startups. I love entrepreneurship, but what if one day I find out that another path would actually have been way more fun or a way better fit for me? Right. So then I just wanted to say, hey, I want to give it a try just to get my experience. And that's just the way that I work. I then want to get my hands on it, try things out instead of overthinking stuff, but just go out there and try and learn. And then I learned it was a great team, but also, very corporate, so you can move fast, etc. So it was a great experience for a 50% workload for 1 year. But then it was also good for me to say, hey, I tried it. It was totally good, but it was not like a game changer or anything of that sort. I'm really in the sweet spot because I've never worked before a real job before, right? Right after university, I started with Gymhopper, so I never really had a real full-time job before. And for me, it felt a bit almost like too good to be true, because I was so happy doing that. I really thrived along that way, in that journey. And I was like, hey, Gymhopper, like entrepreneurship, startups, that's really my thing, like my passion. And sometimes I then just wondered, well, but what if one day I just wake up and this is all like, not the right fit for me anymore.
Right.
So I just wanted to have that experience that I could compare. And that also gave me the confidence that, hey, you're on the right path. Don't worry, it's going to be fine.
Great. Yeah, I think that's super important, right? Like, you don't want to always be wondering, what if I had done that, or what if I've done this? So it's good to try out your options and then, know for sure that this is what, really fits me.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. And then, 2018 was also the pivotal year when you discovered Swisspreneur. Yeah. So you might not have joined Swisspreneur if you hadn't met Christian Hirsig. So how did you meet him?
Yeah, it's actually a fun story because, with Gymhopper in the early days, we participated in all these startup programs. And often they then give you a coach who can help you with your company and the beginnings and answer questions and stuff. So Chris was actually our very first coach with Gymhopper. And we got along very well, and we also became friends afterwards. And then I saw that he was doing the video interviews for Swisspreneur. Mm-hmm. And then one day, once I had a bit more room because the exit was around the corner, and I also knew, okay, I'm going to have a bit more time now. I really loved what he and Alain were doing. And I just told him, like, hey, now we'll have a bit more time. I love what you guys are doing. Let me know if I can get involved in any way. And he was like, oh, good timing. I'm actually looking for a replacement.
Okay, cool.
And then we started the conversation there, also talked to Alain. And
So how was the whole decision-making process like? Like, did you know you wanted to be the podcast host?
Not at all, no. Chris had to push me there. First, I said, hey, I can manage the project, but I don't want to be on camera or on audio. I don't want any of this,
right? I can feel you.
And then first we were looking for someone else to moderate the show. Yeah. And then Chris did like an interview with him, but there was not like a good fit. And then I remember I was in the garden of my grandma when he then called me on a Sunday and said, look, I think you should do it. He told me. I was like, yeah, but I don't feel confident. Like, this is just too much. I have no experience. And then he said, look, we do a test episode. You interview me, sort of as a handover, exactly what we're doing now to a certain degree. Yes. And then we show it to Alain. And if he likes it, then you can continue. Of course, also if you like it. And if not, it was just 1 hour of our time. That's it. And I said, sure, let's do it. I mean, there's nothing to lose, right? Let's jump. I'm really thankful for his little push there. Right. There were different moments, also as a coach, whenever he pushed me a little bit to go in the right direction. And then we did that interview. I think it went pretty well, despite not having any experience at all. Right. Alain also enjoyed it. And then we said, okay. It was also a lot of fun for me then, it turned out. And then we took it from there.
I mean, you've done a wonderful job, right? Like taking over. I mean, in the past 4 years now, it started with 16 recorded interviews, and now you're Apple's #1 business podcast in Switzerland with your own masterclass, coaching program, and syndicate. So what do you attribute the success of Swisspreneur to?
It escalated quickly, right? No, I mean, for me, it was always clear. It's definitely the amazing team. So over the past 4 years, we basically worked with the exact same team. Of course, we were growing, but we work with the exact same team. And we are just a bunch of really cool human beings who share the same values, actually, right, but are also just very intrinsically motivated to change stuff for the better and to learn. And I mean, sometimes I really get like goosebumps when I talk about it. It's so cool. Like, I couldn't wish for a better team. It's such an amazing team behind Swisspreneur that makes all of that possible.
So was that like carefully thought out to get people who fit the culture, or was it just happenstance that people just came in?
So first it was more coincidence, but it was like, Björn, for example, I used to work with him at Gymhopper, so we know each other. Lars was my former roommate. Dominique, who has been with Alain and Chris from the beginning, so even before I joined. Right. And then we basically grew step by step from there. And I think if you really have great people at the beginning, the core team, right, it's then very easy to expand from that. Then, of course, also Cecilia, she's the sister of our former CTO at Gymhopper, right, and she also already worked with us there. Then we brought her on board, and that was just like amazing to be able to work with talented and great people that we've worked in the past. And I think like no matter what we're doing, that's always sort of the blueprint. Once you have your crew, once you know your people who share the same values, bring completely different skills and talents to the table, it doesn't matter what we do. That's just the crew that I want to work with.
It's like the golden ticket,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Awesome. So, I mean, last year, or rather I would say 2020, right? You were working at My Clubs as well. Then you joined Rentouch, which you are also presently working in, which is a PIplanning app developer company.
Exactly.
And you were volunteering at Swisspreneur. So how did you manage your time and energy at that point of time, right? Like juggling all of this.
Sometimes it was not easy, but I at least I think that I'm pretty efficient, so I can get quite some stuff done in a short amount of time, because I also really enjoy doing it, and I try to focus on the stuff where I'm good at and try to leave the others, like, you can ask Björn, finances, not my strength, right? Expense management, not my strength. So I'm very happy to have great people in the team who can then take care of that. But I'm very good at doing like the interviews or doing sales for B2B enterprise stuff. So that's then what I try to focus on, because that gives me joy, that gives me energy. And then it's not a big problem for me to also work a lot, because I really enjoy doing so.
Awesome. Okay. And right now you're the enterprise director, account director at Rentouch, and you're a salesperson at heart. Do you ever miss running your own venture?
Well, technically, I thought about that. So technically, I think Swisspreneur is basically like a bit of a venture now. So that always feels like that, big time. And at the same time, we also have this structure. So I have a lot of freedom at Rentouch. So basically, I can plan and live my day however I want. I'm also like included in important decision making there, and really can have an influence and can have my calling. So it's not like somebody tells me what to do, but I can decide and focus on that. So it still feels like, although it's not my own company, it still feels like that. And there, of course, you also have the legal part where you can actually, eventually become a shareholder or participate in the employee stock option pool, stuff like that, to get that feeling that you're also an owner of the company. I think that's always very important to me. And if that's a given, it's more freedom oriented for me than anything else. If that's a given, then it's almost equal to running your own company,
right,
just with probably a bit less stress.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you have the freedom, you have less stress because of some of the responsibilities. So the fulfillment, comes there.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. You once told me that most founders are actually unhappy. Why do you think that is?
Oh, did I really tell you that?
I mean, you can correct me though.
No, that's fair. No, but I mean, like the whole mental health part. I think maybe that was a time when I was talking to many founders,
right,
and many of them were stressed out or didn't really enjoy what they were doing. I remember there were also some interviews where they then said, well, the company grew so big, I enjoyed the early days, the fun part, but now I just have to do all that stuff, meet with investors, do the reportings. I don't really enjoy it that much. So I think there's a lot of stress out there of being a founder, right? Especially if you also take on external money, because then you have many different stakeholders that you need to satisfy. And basically everybody comes with their problems, they come straight to you because you are supposed to help them. But who do you go to with your problems, right? You are basically alone. So it's really a lonely job. Right. I think it's really important that you do have a strong co-founding or at least management team to really, do the heavy lifting together and to also support each other to make that work and to hopefully also find a good balance that where you can still be happy. But at the same time, I also think that your roles change and it evolves, and you have to be also always a bit self-reflective, right? To understand, am I still the right person for that job? I have the biggest respect for people like Mattis Büchi from TaxFix and Small PDF. He just stepped down as CEO because he felt, well, now we're at the good point. The company is thriving. That's actually the ideal moment to leave. It's time to get someone else to replace me as CEO. And he marvelously executed on that. And I have the biggest respect for these people, because then they realize what they love doing, what they're good at, might have not changed, but the role, the requirements, because the company grew so fast, has changed so that they cannot, bring that together anymore. And then it's time to find someone else.
Okay. So if you had to pin it down, what would be the 3 top qualities that you think are important for an entrepreneur to have in their professional life?
I mean, being able to sell. You have always to be selling.
Okay.
You're selling yourself, you're selling your product, you're selling your company to investors. Selling is key from my perspective. Then I think you also have, it's not a real skill, but just to be self-reflective. I think that's crucial to not only make the right decisions, but also to stay down to earth and approachable for your team, to not have a bad culture or anything, to really, also be able to jump over your ego and make the right decision instead of what feels right for you. And then the third one, I think that is often overlooked, you need to be good at taking care of yourself. Because if you don't do that, there will be no company. If you die tomorrow because you overworked yourself and you have a heart attack, there might, ideally there still is a company, but probably not the same. So I think that's really important too, besides everything else.
Okay. And what would you say would also be the 3 important qualities to have as an entrepreneur in your personal life, with your personal relations? Because, you're busy, you're focused on something.
Very similar, except for the selling part, I guess. I think the self-reflective part and the taking good care of yourself is equally important there.
Yeah.
Something that I often struggle with is just to find a good way to relax and recover. I think you're much better at this than I am. I wish I had that skill to really, just calm down and clear my mind. But this goes a bit into the same direction of taking good care of yourself, but really understanding how you tick, what gives you joy, and really focusing on these parts. Because, what is life without joy and happiness, right? I mean, yeah.
Wonderful. So your team also describes you to be notoriously sociable, extremely extroverted person. And together with you and Christian, you probably know half of Switzerland, right? So you're probably the best person to ask, where is the Swiss ecosystem headed?
Well, that's a very interesting take, because I feel like there's a big momentum developing right now. If you look back a few years, when we were also starting out with Swisspreneur in 4 or 5 years ago, there was basically, of course, there were some companies, more companies getting founded. But what we see now is, there's just Climeworks raised a 600 million round. Yokoi raised capital from Sequoia. So now the big US VCs are investing here in Switzerland.
Yay!
It's crazy, right? So there's really this momentum developing. And I love seeing that, because then, and that's what we did with the Swiss Startup Mafia map, ideally, if you then have an exit or an IPO, that money will then flow back into the ecosystem to finance the next generation of entrepreneurs. Yes. So with the Mafia map, we wanted to see which other startups came out of which mother company, so to speak. And I think that's crucial to measure the health of the ecosystem. And I think we're on a really good path now, but we also need to make sure that money is coming back to the ecosystem and not just stays abroad or somewhere else.
Yes, totally.
So hopefully we'll see more IPOs and more big exits from Swiss companies.
Yeah, I hope so too. And where can we find the Mafia map?
Of course, on our website, swisspreneur.org.
Okay, cool. So what's next for you, Silvan?
We'll see. I mean, I'm fully committed and very excited about the Rentouch journey. So there, I think we're in a really sweet position. I'm very enthusiastic about the decisions that we can make over the next few weeks and months. And it's just a really great team and a great company to work for. And we also have a lot more ideas with Swisspreneur. So I think having those two as my main focus and nothing else, that's a really beneficial relationship. I can learn, from Swisspreneur, then execute that stuff in my day job at Rentouch, come back with questions and learn more stuff to get better. So it's like a very positive cycle.
I totally agree. I'm kind of in a similar situation, right? So I can completely understand, getting the best of everywhere and making the best use of that information.
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right, so I would like to ask you recommendations on resources and gadgets that you can tell our listeners about.
Sure. So everybody who met me always looks at my hand and say,
yes.
Are you married? No, I'm not married, but I have a tracking ring, the Aura ring. So for me, this is a really good tool to measure sleep, but to also measure my HRV, the heart rate variability, to understand how well recovered am I today? Can I hit the gym really hard, or should I take it a bit slow? So that's my number one gadget recommendation.
Okay.
Resources, there are many great books.
Yeah.
One of my favorite ones is from Ben Horowitz, The Hard Thing About Hard Things, because it also shows the difficult, the ugly, and the challenging side of entrepreneurship, I think it's really great inspiration to also see what it really means to run a company.
Awesome. I will check that one out.
It's a good one.
All right. So now we're moving to our last segment, which is the rapid fire questions. Are you ready for this?
Let's see. Yeah.
All right. Zurich or Bern?
Fun fact, now Zurich. I always promoted Bern heavily when I came here and moved here about 3 years ago. But now I have to say Zurich, that's, where I live, where my heart is at the moment. And I think it's just a wonderful place, and there's also much more going on startup-wise. So Zurich for now.
All right. Working for a startup or running a startup?
Both. If the case is interesting enough, both are okay.
All right. Being an interviewer or being an entrepreneur?
Woo. That's a tough one. But yeah, I would say entrepreneur, because you can also be an entrepreneur then interview people.
That's true. Following or leading?
Depends on the case. Usually I do like to lead, but with a strong team to back me up and to walk in the same direction.
Right. Coke or Pepsi?
At the moment, neither of them.
That's true.
But if I had to choose, it's clearly Coke.
All right. I'm team Coke too.
Perfect.
Pepsi's sweet.
Pepsi's okay every now and then, but Coke is the real stuff.
Yes. Jump off a plane or dive deep into the ocean?
Oh, definitely the plane. Even better, helicopter.
Really?
Yeah, but for me, everything up in the air, I like that stuff.
All right.
Ocean, not so much.
Okay. Your favorite task to do?
Sales. Yeah, closing deals.
Okay. Do you have like some kind of ticker that you use, or
I
like
wish,
a horn
yeah.
you blow every time you make a sale?
No, we don't. But I do like put on some of my favorite music and enjoy the moment a bit. Yeah.
Great. Your personal nightmare would be?
Losing my health.
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel
because
that.
without health, everything is worthless, and you only have one desire, then you just want to get healthy again.
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
So how was it for you today? Are you now eager to like switch back to being
Sure,
the interviewer?
Yeah. I mean, I think you did a fantastic job. I really
you.
enjoyed the conversation, and I can't wait to listen to many more of your podcasts on our channel very soon. And I think it's really great to have you here in our team, and excited to what else we will do and tackle in the future with the amazing Swisspreneur squad.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful to speak with you, and thanks for this opportunity.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, you can support us by rating our show on Apple Podcasts. This way, we can reach an ever-growing number of aspiring entrepreneurs.